What's the most satisfying act of revenge that you've ever experienced? I couldn't stand this one kid who I went to high school with, who lived a few blocks away in the neighborhood. One night, he sent cops to my parents' house where I was still living, telling them I had done something I didn't do. Luckily I had a receipt in my pocket from the restaurant I was at, in suburb 10 miles away that was time-stamped half an hour later than when he said the incident occurred. Regardless, my parents were woken up, etc. I was pissed. Well, a few days later, my mom bought some plants that she left in the kitchen window. Our family cat was a nutball to begin with, but all of a sudden he was constantly jumping on the counters, eating these plants. When I'd try and shoo him down, he would actually take a defensive stance and hiss and scratch. 10 minutes later, he would be back, chewing on the leaves. I asked my mom what the plants were, and she said, "Oh, they are catnip. They have a really pretty flower. I'm going to plant them in the backyard when the weather warms up." I was like, "Not a chance you're planting these in our backyard. Look what you're doing to the cat. He's an aggressive stoner. You'll bring every cat in the neighborhood, and they will all fight, all night long." Suddenly, at that exact moment, a revenge plot was born. The following night, I snuck into his backyard and planted the catnip everywhere. My friend who lived across the street from him told me it worked perfectly, and that he was always complaining about cats fighting in his backyard after that. Revenge. No physical confrontation, no property damage, just stoned cats. Felt a little like some sort of supervillain, sending out my cat minions to do my dirty work. When I was in junior high I used to hang out with these dudes during PE class. Then, they turned into douchebags. They started bullying other kids, not participating in any of the activities, etc. I started getting in trouble just by hanging out with them, so I stopped. Of course, I was now a bussy. They would do things like try to push me while running track, gang up on me in sports, etc. Well, one day I opened my lunch to find my dessert missing. This went on 4 days, and I had no idea where it was going. I then saw one of the dudes eating it while laughing at the lunch table and shooting me knowing glances. I could have easily beat this faker down, but I was never into physical violence. So I thought, and I thought, and I schemed, and it hit me. The next week, I brought homemade brownies. Mondays were fine. Tuesdays were fine. Wednesdays were fine. Thursdays had a little surprise in them in the form of chocolate laxatives. While he was eating the brownie during lunch I approached him. I told him I knew he was stealing my desserts and he should stop. "What are you going to do about it?" was his reply to the laughs of his little cronies. I turned around and walked away. We found ourselves in PE class a bit later that afternoon. It was time for calisthenics. Jumping jacks, sit-ups, stretching, and oh my god, what the hell was the scream from a girl a few rows over from me. This kid cheated so much his entire gym shorts were soaked with brown liquid. It was going down his legs. It was filling his shoes. He tried to run out of the gym, but slipped in the sheet water and got it all over his body and some on his face. For 2 weeks he didn't come to school. While he was gone, the rumors started. Some said he died. Some said he was sheeting blood. None of those were true. He was so fucking embarrassed, and he knew what he was coming back to. This happened in 7th grade. We parted ways after junior high when I went to private high school. However, I heard that the sheet incident followed him through high school. No one would hang out with him. He was a social pariah. Now, keep in mind I had no idea it would turn out like that. I figured he would get stomach cramps and diarrhea that night. I had no idea he would end up taking a sheet bath in the middle of gym in front of everyone. But I didn't regret it, and still don't. He was a piece of shit that deserved what he got. Not really sure if he suspected me or not. If he did, he never let on. My Xbox Live account was stolen from me by some random person I didn't know. Not really sure how he did it. Maybe got lucky and guessed my password or something. But anyways, I woke up, tried signing on, and it wasn't working. Tried recovering it, said my password was wrong. Went on my second account and said stolen account was off my friends list. Seemed as if my account had vanished into thin air. At the time I was pretty big into COD, World at War, and I was in the top 1000 players for Search and Destroy, so I went into the leaderboards and eventually found my account with a different gamer tag and the friends deleted. So, I called Sparks support and began a very long process to get my account back. Finally a few weeks later they got my email and password to the account and sent them to me, as I was the rightful owner to the account and had my parents' credit card on the account to prove it. So they sent me this kid's email and password he had put on my account. I went on Facebook and signed in using those credentials, and by God it logged me into the faker's Facebook profile. I proceeded to like hundreds of homosexual pride pages. No offense to gay people, I was 15 at the time and this was the most insulting thing I could think of, and pages dedicated to bestiality and any other weird messed up thing I found. Then I posted a bunch of weird tranny porn and midget porn and everything my wild teen mind could find. Topped it all off by sending messages to at least 30 girls on his friends list, saying all sorts of faked up weird stuff, ranging from "I'm gay and need somebody to talk to about it" to "I sucked a dog's dick once and liked it." Then changed his email and password to make it extra hard to get on and delete the stuff. Checked his page for a while after that, and he had deleted his Facebook within 2 hours. But I like to think that I faked his day up, and that makes me happy, even though it was about 3 weeks after he had taken my account. Totally worth it. TLDR's Barks account gets stolen. Figure out the thief's Facebook email and password. Post nasty disgusting things for an hour as revenge. Edit. Okay, it wasn't as simple as sending me the email and password. They sent me the email, and I had to go through the process of resetting the email's password. Once I did that, I had access to my account. After that I went to Facebook and tried signing in with that email, and then went through the process of resetting a Facebook password. So basically I just reset it then logged in with my new password. Sorry, I guess that's sort of important information, but I had just gotten to work when I posted it, and it was like 5 years ago, so I sort of forgot some details. Not me, but my sister. My sister and I grew up in Kentucky, and after 20 plus years of living here, she decided she was ready for something new in life, so she made plans to move to Washington State. She made all the arrangements to move, packed all her things, etc. The only things she didn't want to take were her 2 cats. She was just going to be staying in someone's house until she could get a little money saved after the move. So she left them with one of her co-workers that she had known / worked with for several years until she could come back and get them. Fast forward 6 months, my sister is living happily on the West Coast. A mutual friend of all of ours, mine, my sister, her co-worker, sees said co-worker where my sister worked with him. Friend asks how everything is going and asks how the cats are. While refusing to make eye contact, he tells our friend one got out about a month ago, the other a week ago. Please don't tell. Insert my sister's name here. So naturally the first thing our friend does is call my sister to tell her. Obviously her co-worker hadn't said anything to my sister. My sister calls me, super upset, because she, like a lot of Reddit, loves her cats, and begs me to try and find them. The only option was to try the Humane Society, so I called another friend of ours to take me. We go to the Humane Society, search the entire lost and found section, to no avail, so we search the adoption center. It seemed completely hopeless, but by some strange and awesome universal force, I approach the last cage to find one of her cats. Curious as to how he found his way here, I ask the people working there, and they politely inform me he was an owner give up. When I ask the date he was taken in, they tell me, and I figure out it was only 1 month after my sister had moved. So, I readopt her cat, call her to tell her, she breaks down in tears of joy, and I ask if she wants me to do anything about it, the kind of thing a brother does when someone fucks with their sister, to which she tells me no, everything will work itself out. Fast forward another few months, and my sister has returned to Kentucky to pick up her cat. While in town, my sister, dad, and myself all go out to eat a family breakfast. Halfway through our meal, I look over and see her old co-worker sitting in a booth across from an attractive young lady. I tell my sister, and she instantly becomes furious. My dad tells her not to do anything, but I tell her she has to. So, we give our dad a minute to leave, and as soon as he does, my sister grabs a plastic ketchup bottle, stands up, walks to his table, flips the cap open, and sprays him up and down his face and shirt, giving him only time for his voice to crack. Oh my god. The entire restaurant had stopped what they were doing to watch all this go down, and everyone was completely silent, except the one guy in the back that couldn't stop laughing. My sister finishes spraying the ketchup, throws the bottle in his face and just says fuck you. I know what you did. Now she is happily reunited with one of her cats. 4 years and years in late elementary school and most of middle school, this one kid would just bully me constantly. Towards the end of 8th grade it had gotten pretty bad, and I really just wanted it to end. Let's call him Chris. When looking for a lost parrot on my property, I found the bottom half of some animal, may have been a muskrat, groundhog, or something similar, but I couldn't be sure exactly what, under a tree, and brought it back to the house. I then called my mom, who was out of town traveling at the time, how I'd go about making it stop stinking. This was before I could really just Google it. She wouldn't really help me, because I wouldn't tell her why I wanted to disinfect a dead rodent, but I let it sit out in the sun. This was late May, for a few days, and that killed most of the bugs and whatnot. I then wrapped it up in butcher paper, and put it in a paper bag. I then wrote, "Dear Chris, you forgot your lunch this morning. Love, Mom" on it. Chris always brought a bagged lunch in to school every single day. In the morning after the first class period started, I went to his locker, no one locked this, and put it in his locker. After first period you could hear the screech from the floor below. Along with everyone else, I ran towards the sound, and saw Chris walking down the hallway sobbing. I didn't do much to hide the fact that I did it, and was given a day of in-school suspension. The principal didn't find the humor in negotiating for a half day, since it was only half a rodent. Chris never really messed with me after that. My girlfriend, at the time, had a boss who was always hitting on her. He would buy her things, flirt with her, etc. We hit a rough patch in our relationship, and he did everything in his power to win her from me. He was a VP at the company, so he had the money, and probably the smooth talking skills. She would bring him up in fights as a comparison. I got sick of it. Me and her ended our 3-year relationship, and sure enough, they are dating about a month later. However, he knew that the company was making her work overtime and not paying her, and said there's nothing I could do about it when she asked him, and he knew that she was having to take work home, which was a no-no, since she was a lingerie designer and was helping her start her own line, which was a conflict of interest to his company. Flashback to a few months earlier. Her company has a Christmas party, and I meet the CEO. I won't say his name, but it was a name that I remembered for some reason. Now, I was pissed. This scumbag basically took my girlfriend from me. I know it was probably for the best, because any girl that would fall for that shouldn't be with me anyway. But I'm not thinking that way at the time. I have no ethical hang-ups about revenge, and it was time to get some. I realized that her company email address had a template. First name, last name, @company.com. So I figured that the CEO's email address probably had the same format. With all the knowledge I had, it would be a shame not to blindly email the CEO of his company with detailed information about how his VP was putting his company at risk by dating his employees, knowingly breaking employment laws, allowing sensitive materials out into the public, and start a rival company. So that's what I did. I never got a response from the CEO. However, a couple years later I ran into my ex and had a couple of drinks with her. She told me about how shitty of a boyfriend he was, how they fought all the time, and how she went off and hit him one night. She got really close to hitting me a couple of times, but I calmly told her that if she laid a hand on me, I would hit her back harder than she could ever imagine, and would be happy to go to jail for it. She also told me that the problems really started when he lost his job. I asked how that happened, and she told me that it was abrupt, but even he didn't really know the reason. It was one of those HR-driven "we are letting you go" type firings. I told her what I did. She was shocked and angry and left the bar without saying another word, but I didn't give a shit. Even the remote possibility that I was the reason why that scumbag got fired and he got my shitty girlfriend who hit him Made me feel like $1,000,000. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. Edit. Spelling. I was at the park with my girlfriend. It was a hot day, so we decided to eat ice cream at a bench. So once we were done we were holding hands and talking. Out of nowhere this older couple in their mid-20s with their daughter who looked like she was at least 5 years old. They then proceeded to shout and yell at us for acting indecently in front of their daughter and shaming us for holding hands in the park. Mind you, they were cussing and yelling in front of their daughter. We tell them we're doing nothing wrong and they should be ashamed for using that kind of language in front of their daughter. Eventually the mom gets into my girlfriend's face and says she will fuck her up and called her Q-beach. I was about to take matters into my own hands, but my girlfriend said no, let's just leave, so I did. As we were walking away they screamed at us and said that they were going to call the cops. We said okay. We saw an elderly couple and they asked if everything's okay. We told them what happened and they said they knew. They saw the whole thing happened. Turns out the elderly gentleman was an ex-cop and knew people who were on the force, so he said to just stay and sit with them and they will explain to the police. So we're sitting waiting for the police and the couple with the daughter are standing by us recording us. Finally the police show up and immediately one of the officers sees the elderly man and they know each other and greet each other. They talk to the other couple first and then me and my girlfriend. He asked if we were doing anything inappropriately at the park and we said no. Then off to the side we, including the officer, heard the mother start cussing at the elderly lady, telling her to mind her own business. The officer gives us one look and says sorry for wasting your time, you're free to go. Edit. Okay, to clear things up, no, I'm not a lesbian, I'm a male. And this older couple were in their late 20s, like 26 or 27. Me and my girlfriend are barely going to be 20. TLDR. Crazy couple call cops on me and girlfriend. Backfires and they get in trouble. I work retail. This woman comes in to return a cell phone. She says she's been to the news. They did a show on her and she was told by head office that she can come in for a complete refund. She is months past our 14-day return period. I'll let her know I'm sorry, but because we are a franchise location, we provide cannot warranty support. The return period is 14 days. The closest warranty is on this card I'm handing you. She freaks the fuck out, calling me every 4-letter word she can think of. I tell her I'm sorry and I move on to the next customer. She is honking and flapping at the customers in my store, going on about how her kid is in the hospital with cancer, etc. She finally leaves. 10 minutes later her daughter comes in. I repeat the 14-day/warranty center speech. She calls me a fuckwit and leaves. Fast forward a month, my boss calls me and says a woman will be in this afternoon by the name of XXXXXXX. Return it and give her full refund. I say okay. 4 days later she comes in and throws the phone on the counter with the receipt and says nothing at all. I do the refund and I make the call to customer care to cancel the line. Welp. She decided it was time to leave because she has her money and I'm an inferior sack of skin wasting her time. Customer care finally picks up and asks to verify the account and ask the customer a few questions. Because the customer has left and cannot verify the account, the phone line cannot be cancelled. I say thank you and hang up. She's gonna receive a letter in a couple months from collections because we cannot contact her anymore. Edit. In a word. Freshman year. Fresh out of middle school, aka the worst years of my entire faking life. I had always been sort of easy to anger, which naturally made me a prime bullying target. But I slowly started to mellow out once high school came along. But this was freshman year, so I was still in a sort of transfer state, if you will. Anyone who's been to high school knows that freshmen still have the mindset of middle schoolers, some more so than others. Science class. One of those teachers that clearly is not into what he is doing. I sat at the front of the class with my friends and we would always spend all class just passing notes to one another. The table nearby featured a bunch of kids who entertained themselves by throwing things at us. Small things, like paperclips, bits of erasers, even little balls of silly putty, if I remember right. Being good little boys and girls, my friends and I let the teacher know, and the teacher reprimands the kids. But this is high school, and you know that the jack sheet. They kept throwing things at us. This continued for about a week, maybe 2. Can't remember. We tell the teacher again. Teacher scolds the kids. Goes back to teaching. They still throw things. Now for the most part, when I was bullied, I was told to just ignore it, and for the most part one did. But something about that day, something clicked in my head, and finally I thought to myself, wait a minute, I don't have to put up with this shit. Fun fact, in the middle of every table in the class, was a stack of textbooks that for the most part went unused. I knew what I had to do. The next projectile that hit our table was met with swift and heavy retaliation in the form of a hardbound missile sent careening at the attacker's face. Unfortunately I was never good at sports and I missed. The book suffered no injuries. Much to my relief, I would have had to pay for a new one, I'm certain. There were no casualties that day, but the message had been made clear. Do not fuck with me anymore. I shook the hand of one of my peers from across the room after class, and went about my merry way. I did not get in a lick of trouble for it, and starting from that moment they never threw things at us again. TLDR, I chucked a textbook at a bully, and he stopped bullying me, and I didn't get in trouble for it. Growing up, from ages 11 to about 16, I was banned from any kind of leisure reading, activities etc. My life was literally textbooks and the Bible, and a lot of empty time confined to a room I wasn't allowed to leave for anything, including bathroom breaks or food, without permission. All phone conversations were held on speakerphone with an adult present, and I was typically told around 5 to 8 times a day a verbal list of all the ways I'd faked up that day/week/whatever. All because my stepmother married my father knowing he had me, and knowing she didn't want to help raise me. So she made my life hell, because the fact that I even existed was pretty much the bane of her existence. The reason I moved in with my father at 11 years old, a month before her and Milligram's dad started dating, is because I was having a lot of abuse issues from my mom and her boyfriends, to make coming into that crap even worse. One of her bartering tools was she had raised 3 sons, and knew what she was doing anytime my dad tried to interject. She liked to say how much better they all are than me, and how good they listened, how none of them had problems. 2 of her sons are on assistance, and have never gone to college. One of them actually had to move in with us, because he was on the run from the law and the drug cartel in his home state for reasons I won't elaborate on. To this day, car notes, home leases, phone bills etc. have to be put in his mom's or his girlfriend's name, and has to use the odd jobs board in his local town to make any money, since jobs mean background checks and being in the system. The oldest is doing really well for himself, and was recently married. I work full time, make more than she does. I've had 3 years of living as an adult, she's had 20 plus. Worked at jobs that I love, and am relatively emotionally and mentally stable with no assistance through prescriptions, while she continues to pop pill after pill, complaint after complaint, and still talks about all the ways in which I'm ruining her marriage, some 7 years after I moved out. She's in a hole, and is miserable, and I'm completely happy with my life and the path I'm on. Fuck you, Tammy. Got my degree, and wasn't able to get a promotion at my current company. Let my boss know I was looking for a new job, and handled the move professionally. Left on good terms. Started my new job, at a significant bump in pay, and quickly discovered it was nothing like the DBA job I had interviewed for. Instead of managing databases, I was expected to learn a proprietary coding language created by my new boss. There was no documentation and he treated everyone like an idiot if they asked questions while trying to learn. After 3 months I had a review. I was told I was doing great and given a raise. I continued learning and persevering through my boss's abuse. 3 months later I was pulled into another meeting with my boss and his boss. I was told I wasn't meeting expectations, although they wouldn't explain how, and told to sign a document putting me into a lesser position at a significant cut in pay. If I didn't sign, I was told I would be fired. I signed and immediately started looking for another job. I called up my old boss and asked for a reference. She told me she would do so happily, but I should know she had just submitted a job requisition for a new position that I would be perfect for. We discussed it, and I agreed it would be a fit. I went through the interview process and got the job at a higher salary than my new company had started me at. The only problem was that they couldn't bring me on until January 1st. It was oct. I said that was fine. For the next 3 months I made sure to use all my vacation and did next to nothing while at work. I scheduled vacation for the last week of the year. On the last business day of the year I came into the office, handed in my laptop and a letter of resignation that was effective immediately. They were actually surprised that I was quitting. When I was in the 7th grade, my best friend was this overweight girl who always got teased by the popular kids. We went on a camping trip as a class and my friend and I were assigned to the same room in a cabin as 2 of the popular girls. My friend and I were bunked together, and the other 2 girls were bunked together. One day after doing some fun camping activities like mountain rappelling, we returned to the room and my friend saw that her bottle of shampoo had been squeezed all over the pillow and blanket on her bunk bed. She was in tears. She was seriously crying uncontrollably and couldn't fathom who would do such a thing. We spent the rest of the day laundering her bedding, while everyone else was finishing up with more camping activities. That night after she had fallen asleep, I pretended to be asleep too, and I overheard the 2 popular girls whispering about the prank they'd pulled. They were quite pleased with themselves. One of them felt mildly bad about it, but they both still thought it was a great success. Then they changed the subject and started talking about a bunch of other stupid shit. After a while, they started getting tired, and their conversation slowed down. When it had been quiet for a while, I scratched my fingernail repeatedly and quickly against the wall, then stopped abruptly. I don't remember what the wall was made of, but it made a very unique sound, and it wasn't clear where it was coming from. "Did you hear that?" one of the girls asked, suddenly wide awake. The other did hear it. "What was it?" "I don't know." After they calmed down a bit, I did it again. This went on and on for a good hour at least, possibly more. I only scratched the wall briefly every time, but at the same exact pace, and then silently listened as they freaked the hell out. They pondered every possibility: a raccoon on the roof, a ghost, a murderer trying to get in. They told themselves it had to be a raccoon. That's what they kept falling back on. They even got out of the bed to check the window for a raccoon, but saw nothing there. Then when they were all cozy in their beds again, I did it again. They left the cabin to check the roof for a raccoon. Nothing. Sometimes, I chose not to make the noise for a long period of time, to let them think it had stopped. Then, I'd do it again. It was so awesome. They were tired, but terrified and couldn't sleep. They thought I was sleeping the whole time. My friend was asleep. She was snoring loudly, something they had been laughing about. They weren't laughing anymore. I did this until I myself was too tired to go on. Then, I fell asleep with them still wide-eyed and frightened. It was very satisfying to get them back for what they'd done to my friend, making her cry on this trip she'd looked forward to for so long. The next day, I did tell her I overheard them saying that they were the ones who had shampooed her bed, but I don't think I told her that she was avenged. I didn't think it was necessary. I overheard the girls talking to each other the next day about how freaky last night had been, and I continued doing my camping thing, ignoring them completely. I don't really believe in revenge, and have guilt over most vengeful acts I have done, but that one still brings a smile to my face. I should find those girls on Facebook and admit that it was me. I didn't experience it personally, but it was at my behest, and it was satisfying as hell. I worked for a very small company, about 20 employees, right out of college. When the owners of the company went out of town, about 2 or 3 times a year, the managers would frequently throw all-day parties for the workers. We'd grill, drink, play games, etc. There was one older lady at the company that, I guess, for whatever reason, did not like me. I could be a bit outspoken about social issues being in my early 20s, so that may have been it, but I really to this day don't know why she disliked me so much. Anyway, she waited until about a week after one of these parties, went straight to the owners of the company, and told them that the week before, she was watching me, and noticed I didn't do any work all day. None of us had, including her. She was banking on the fact that the owner would only pull my logs for that day and no one else's, and she was right. My managers fought for me. Truthfully, they were probably a bit worried I'd rat them and the whole office out, but it was to no avail. I got fired. The revenge bit of the story is that, since it was such a small company, everyone quickly got wind of what this woman did, and she was given stone cold silent treatment by everyone, including the managers. She even went to the owner and complained that she was being treated unfairly, but there wasn't really a lot he could do about people not wanting to socialize with her. She ended up quitting about 3 weeks after I got fired. Apparently she had trouble finding a job and came back a few months later begging for her job back, but my managers were in charge of all hiring and basically laughed in her face. She went above them again to the owner, but at that point he was sick of her drama and told her he wasn't interested in having her back. TLDR, former co-worker gets me fired behind a bunch of bullshit, ends up quitting because I was well liked at the office and she couldn't handle the backlash from the managers and my co-workers. When I was in 4th grade I got off the school bus one day and began walking home. I was one of very few kids who walked my direction, as the only other kids were 2 very annoying 1st graders. They typically would say all sorts of annoying childish things, and I would typically just ignore them as it was a short walk to my house. One day, however, one of the 1st graders kept twirling his backpack around and throwing it at me. The first time he successfully hit me, I told him to stop. The second time I was a bit ruder about it. And then after several close misses he hit me a third time. This time I told him that, if he threw it again, I would throw my backpack back at him. I had no intentions of actually doing so, but I figured he would be smart enough to stop. Nope. So he throws his backpack again, so in my rage I immediately take mine off and throw mine. I thought I threw it in a way that wouldn't hurt him, but my backpack went soaring towards him and beamed him smack in the face. The kid dropped to the ground and the other kid went running towards him. My backpack had cut above his eye with a decent amount of blood coming out. Still pissed at the kid, I simply picked my backpack up and continued walking home. Later that night his parent came knocking at my door and I fessed up. Even later after that, I realized that the incident happened because I happened to have the 4th Harry Potter book in my backpack. Ouch. And I started feeling really bad at that point. The next day the kid had a black eye, but he never annoyed me again. For those that will say that I was the bad guy, I got called 1st grader beater upper for many years. The kid ended up apologizing for it because all the shit I got for an accident, although that wasn't until I was in high school, and by that time it was a joke among my friends. TLDR, accidentally gave an annoying kid got a black eye, and I got called a 1st grader beater upper for 8 years. But it was worth it. I can't believe I'm about to write this story. I've never told anyone. A few years ago, I found out that my boyfriend who I have been with for a few years was cheating on me and requesting nudes from other girls. When I confronted him about it, he broke down and begged me to forgive him. Like an idiot, I did because I truly loved him. A week goes by, and I'm still hurt and angry. When I tried to talk to him about how I felt, he was quick to disregard everything I said and did not seem remorseful anymore. I thought I knew him, but obviously I was wrong. He has always been a sweet guy and I never would have thought he would do this behind my back. When we finally did talk about it, he tried to turn it around on me. I didn't understand, because I've always been faithful, and I did my best to make him happy. I'm also not just saying to make myself look like a better person than he is, but I was crazy in love with him. I've never been one to do things out of spite, but my anger clouded my better judgment and decisions. One night we both had a terrible fight. It escalated into a physical one. He slapped me, gave me the double bird, I'm not faking kidding, and said he wasn't sorry anymore. Afterwards, I went to hang out with a close friend of mine. I was hysterical. I told my friend what happened between my boyfriend and I don't know how, but it led to amazing sex. I was on birth control, so I let him come inside me. I know, 2 wrongs never make a right and cheating is never okay, but I was just so angry. So later that night, I went back to my boyfriend's house. I know, stupid and dangerous. He apologized and tried to have sex with me. I was so disgusted by him, but I wanted him to eat my friend's cum from inside of me as revenge. He did unknowingly, and after I came, I stood up and said I was leaving him. Never seen him since. Not surprisingly though, he constantly blew up my phone for weeks before he finally got the message. Although it's the only relationship that I had to deal with these kind of problems, it's safe to say that it's a lot harder for me to trust anyone now. I guess you can't really know what kind of person someone really is. TLDR, boyfriend of few years cheated on me and hit me, was not remorseful, and tried to justify himself. Out of blind anger and rage, I made that faker eat another man's cum from my pussy. I hope this isn't too long. Here we go. I grew up with an abusive father, emotionally abusive mother, and got bullied every day at school. I ended up switching schools in 10th grade and minded my own business. I ended up making good friends with this super nerd like myself, but he was a pretty big jock too. I was getting straight A's, but at the ISD school that I did for the second half of the day for computer tech, I'd finish my work in the first hour and leave. It's not that I didn't care, I just knew most of what was being taught. I wasn't being challenged. Due to all of my missing days, they threatened to expel me if I missed another day, which I really feared due to my alcoholic abusive father that was waiting at home. It was October of my senior year. I was carpooling with my one friend and we stopped at Mart. Although I was in CNT classes, he was in early education and really wanted to buy a costume. He got this silly inflatable horse/cowboy outfit for his class, but he really felt that the white shirt I was wearing would have been better for his costume, which it would have been. Now mind you, after having two abusive parents and a sister that constantly treated me like shit and tried to poison me on several occasions, my self-confidence was falling through the cracks of the floor. I really didn't want to take off my shirt for him to see my weird shape. I was skin and bones, but I also have quite the nerd gut going on, and I was really embarrassed. I refused to take off my shirt over and over, politely. He got into his car with my cigs, keys, wallet, and phone all in it. He locked the doors, started the engine, and looked at me with this shit-eating grin. At this point the only thing going through my head was my dad beating the hell out of me when I got home, because I failed him, yet again. I jumped on the roof to stop him. He drove away and slammed on the brakes. I broke my right mastoid, bone behind your ear, feel for it, got Bell's palsy 7th cranial nerve damage, bruised my frontal lobe, personality, and had a subarachnoid bleed, deep internal bleeding of the brain. I was out of school for 3 months. I was really hoping everything could go back to normal, and I took those nervous first steps back into the school. The school where I just blended in, didn't get picked on, and thought I had a good friend. When I returned to school I found out that the school paper was writing about how I was doing drugs, drinking and car surfing. I did none of those things at all, not even once. The local city newspaper was also printing the same about me, things that weren't true in any sense. I confronted the CEO of the newspaper and the newspaper from the school. Both said we try to print the most accurate information. I was hoping the worst was over, but after that I went to the career center, and Jeff, whom I thought I was somewhat friends with, would sing Cruise in USA every single day. The Business Professionals of America competition was coming up, and Jeff had built an elaborate website for the occasion. I was filled with absolute rage. Everything I escaped from, it was back. I spent the 4-hour class coding a virus that would restart his computer every time he booted, erase the specific folder where his BPA project was. The teacher had us all use a particular location on our computers, and a few other things. I unleashed my creation on his computer 2 days before BPA, and in my glory I held my head high. The professor came to me and asked if it was me. I responded calmly, "Why, yes. I did put a virus on his computer that I coded." The professor looked at me kind of cockeyed and said, "Could you please remove it? I can't figure out how to remove it." I said, "Why sure, Mr. 30th." I removed it. He thanked me and Jeff's project. Perhaps a scholarship was gone. Today I feel guilty and realize it was somewhat misdirected anger. I feel bad, I really do. But there's nothing more gratifying than standing up for yourself and learning that you're worth more than what's being dealt to you. I did get the friend back that almost killed me too, but that's another story. Sorry if there is any typos. I just worked a double and I'm a little sleepy. No proofread. XD, I hope you enjoyed my story. Junior year of high school, in trig class, I had this teacher who would always put our test scores on a sheet of paper at the back of class, and she would give us a few minutes to go look at them. I never got up because I knew I did well, and whether I got an A or a wasn't a big deal to me. One day though I got a progress report, which we only got at my school if we were doing poorly in a class, and it said my trig grade dropped from the last test. I knew I did well, so I went to talk to her about it. It turns out it was a typo in the system, one that was obviously intentional. She entered a 98 as a 9.8 and decimals were not necessary in that program, and she says, maybe that's why you should check your grade when I put them up. Whoa. So, every test day she leaves a basket of paper clips right next to where we were to turn the test in, so we can attach any extra credit slips we may have gotten to said test. Every test day she says, 1 paper clip per customer. I started taking whole handfuls of paper clips and stuffing them in my pockets. I was good at this and nobody knew it was me. We had tests pretty often, and she had to keep buying paper clips and kept threatening the class, offering sheet to whoever tattled, promising not to be angry if they'd confess. She was pretty neurotic and I could tell it was driving her crazy. So I saved these paper clips for the rest of the year and I cut them into tiny pieces with wire cutters, and I put them in a box and left them on her desk while she was gone on the last day of school. I won. There was this older kid who was just a big jackass. He bullied everybody and generally made sure everyone knew who he was the boss. This one day I was the target of some remark about me having glasses and being a nerd. I reacted poorly and became an easy target for a while. Thing was he was also successful in sports, having been picked out to play in my city's junior, European, football team, soccer, and liked to boast about it. He kind of had celebrity status at our school because of this. Autumn comes around, and the school announces a football tournament between all classes where each class picked out a team and played each other throughout the semester. The whole thing was pretty well organized and a huge success. I never played football in a team and don't really like sports per se, but from time to time I played during lunch breaks and had become known as a reliable goalie, so of course I get picked out in my class's team. We make it to semi-finals and the game ends tied, so we do penalty kicks to decide the winner. So fate put this bully in front of me. The crowd, other classes and parents, was all expecting him to score as he was the celebrity football player, and I was the nerdy kid who occasionally play goalie on lunch breaks. It was not a deciding shot, yet but to me it was personal. This jackass with all success and way too big ego needed to be taken down a notch. I just had to beat him at something he was good at. He aims for upper right corner, confident that I'd never be able to save it. He puts all his strength into it, but no. You guessed it. I saved. It hurt like hell to catch that ball, but it was so sweet. The part of the crowd that was rooting for my team went nuts. Side note, probably as close to fame I'll ever be to. He got so angry that he went into the locker rooms and punched through a window and cut up his whole arm. A lot of blood, needed stitches but not life threatening. He didn't pick on anyone after that. This was more seriously angry and absolutely ridiculously dangerous, but to this day I secretly love that it worked, while telling everyone it was such a dumb, young thing to do. I worked at Starbucks near Washington, D.C. I was in the fast lane and a guy in a BMW comes into my lane. When I honk, he keeps coming and then gives me the finger. I'm not normally aggressive, and wasn't back then, but I did not have any way to let him in. I had not done anything to him. Stick shift, pass and get in front of him. It felt better. Guy gets next to me and starts laughing at me and saying stuff to me. By this time I tell him he was in the wrong, all while going 70 miles per hour. He then zooms in front of me and hits the brakes. Now I'm emotionally hijacked all to faking hell. It turns into a battle for the other's insurance. Slamming on brakes, parking brakes. Crazy. I'm so pissed, but so scared, and then I slow down in the slow lane. He is in front of me and slows too. I'm now going 30 miles an hour. Highway is going 70 to 80. Guy is getting next to me and trying to get in front of me continuously. Smiling the entire time, laughing and saying shit to me. I see my chance. I roll my window down, yell, hey, and chuck one of those 1990s dash sit on the dash wide-mouthed Starbucks commuter mugs right at the car. It slams into the right quarter panel. I slam on the brakes, exit off the highway, and get lost for 30 minutes trying to find my way back home and work out the nerves from the ordeal. The thing I remember most. His face. It was out of a movie. Slow MOOHH. Sheet. I see the dent barely as I brake and get off the exit before the big orange barrier. His face goes from mockery to absolute horror. It was because of me. Petty, yes. Satisfying. Still get goosebumps thinking about it as I write. Not me but my father. He was working for an IT company developing software, but ended up being asked to help out in sales for a few weeks as their department was short-staffed for some reason. He turned up and found that his new colleagues really didn't like him, for no apparent reason, though he suspected it might be racism. Within the first few days, he'd scored a few sales and his manager had actually offered him a job in sales, but he turned it down as he preferred having a set salary rather than commission. The reason for his relative success was down to two factors: networking, several subscriptions to professional lit journals and magazines. He had started by calling people he knew, and then he started calling people he'd read about in magazines, while the rest of the department were apparently relying on cold calling. Furthermore, having helped write the software he was selling, he could actually explain what it did, while the rest of the department, well, they couldn't. At the beginning of his second week in the department, he took a long lunch break as he had to visit a dentist, and got back to find a woman was being congratulated on her success making a big sale to a company he had planned on calling that very day. When he got to his desk, he noticed things weren't as he'd left them, and noticed a list of people and phone numbers he'd planned on calling had vanished. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what had happened while he was away. Rather than let it slide, he decided to get his revenge. The next day, he made up an excuse to be out of the office in the late morning and early afternoon, spending his time back in the software department. When he returned this time, however, things were a lot more sour. As before, he had left a list of potential customers on his desk, and, as before, the woman had taken it off his desk while he was away and started making calls. The problem is that one of the phone numbers wasn't for a company, but for the wife of her boss, who her boss was currently in the process of divorcing. And the name he had listed next to the number was the mistress of said boss, the reason they were getting divorced. The boss wasn't happy at all to get a phone call from his soon-to-be ex-wife's lawyer, accusing him of getting his staff to harass her. She got fired, didn't get any commission for the big sale she'd made the previous day, and my dad ended up finalizing that sale in the end, as he explained that, by sheer coincidence, he had gone to university with the guy the woman was dealing with. A few weeks later, she accused my dad of plotting and setting up the whole thing, but, by this time, he was back in his old position and the guy in charge of the sales department had no power over him. This happened more years ago than I care to count, but it still pleases me. I went to a boarding school. There was another kid there who was horribly competitive and smug, especially, it seemed, towards me. He was always telling me how he was better than me, how he always got better grades than me, how he was going to get into a better university than me, and would then go on about how crap I was and how academically inferior I was to him, and how I would never really amount to anything. For some reason I just took it and didn't really react until one night when I saw an opportunity. He was a member of a club created for the school's high-achieving pupils. Needless to say, I wasn't. This club met in a classroom one evening each week. I bumped into him on his way to one of these meets and, to wind him up, told him I thought I'd go along too. He just sneered at me, telling me it wasn't appropriate for me to be there. I told him that not only was I going along, but I was faster than him, and I'd race him there. He couldn't resist the competition, so we agreed that I'd take the outside route. It was raining, and he'd go via the inside route, which involved cutting across an assembly hall. We set off as fast as we could, him sprinting towards the hall and me going the outside route. Then it struck me, there was a classical music concert going on in the assembly hall that he was approaching at high speed. Now, I should have shouted to him to warn him, but instead I could only stop and watch and laugh as he exploded through a double swing door right in the middle of a quiet violin solo that had to stop as the performer was so shocked by his sudden entry that had made over 400 parents and pupils gasp and stare at him. He then got hauled up in front of the teacher, who was in charge of the concert, and, being a grass, he brought me in too. when he explained we were on our way to his elitist, stuck-up club meet, and I'd suggested a race I denied all knowledge, and asked what would I want to go to one of those meetings for. It's hardly appropriate for me as if the teacher totally believed me and this other kid got punished. I don't think he ever forgave me. TLDR, made a smug T-Wat run full speed into an assembly hall bringing a classical concert to an immediate halt in front of 400 shocked people. I inherited low six-figure amount of money from my father, helped a girl I knew for years, because she was getting evicted by her own mother. Over the months her and her boyfriend became addicted to heroin and attempted to extort me for money. I told them I was moving cross country. I did the week. Before they left they set me up for an armed robbery. I was throwing my garbage out and someone kicked my door open. A guy kicked my door down with a shotgun and screamed, "What's in the bag? What is in the bag, nigga?" I said, "It's just garbage." He said, "I don't care." I said, "Why?" Nearly in tears. Not part of the revenge story, just thought it was funny. I was relieved of most my valuables and close to 10k. The couple themselves, from being sneaky and sing fraud and taking advantage of my good nature, took me for 40k to 70k in cash, back rent, back bills, and assorted other, including paying for her kid's birthday because she was a broke junkie. After all was said and done, I just called the cops. Cops connected them with several other crimes throughout the area. Both of them and the robber are facing from 7 to 55 years in jail, and she is never allowed to see her son again. Also, I get a percentage of their money until probably forever, because I can't see them getting jobs that matter or pay well after being felons. Wish I could just get my money back in a lump sum, but them being caged for a majority of their lives and denied access to their kids is fine too. Back in summer of '02 I was at this AIDS festival in Paris, Solidays or something. Anyway, you know how lots of people and fairgrounds go. There was one of those porta-potty areas with the rows of blue box toilets, a huge line, and about a 30-minute wait. So I waited in line. It was forever. I had to go really bad, but it's cool. Everybody's being polite, and we are moving along. There's just that many people. Then I'm 3 people from the front of the line. It's about to be my turn. Relief sounds too sweet for words at this point. Then some random guy walks past the dozens upon dozens of patient people in the line, walks up to a door that opens as someone steps out, and he enters. Didn't even wait at all. People notice, they sigh, call him names, but nobody does anything. I'm pissed. This is not going to simply get ignored. Justice must be served. I walk forward onto this ribbed aluminum stage that the porta-potties are sitting on. There's a concrete block sitting there. I pick it up and wedge it in front of the door of the line cutter's blue box door and the ribbing of the stage. It's seen there good and tight. I went back to stand in line. The people in line are laughing. The door bangs. No one moves. The door begins to bang faster and harder. No one goes anywhere near it. I'm at the front of the line. It's my turn. I do my thing. The door is still banging. The toilet is foul and that used for hours by hundreds of people way. I'm happy to get out. The door is still banging. I walk off into the sunset, past dozens of people who are giggling about the angry porta-potty that rattles in the distance. TLDR, some guy skips a 1/2 hour wait for a bathroom, gets trapped and must wait for rescue from the people he cut in front of. Back in middle school, there was a trio of mean girls who talked so much shit about my outfit and how I didn't fit in. To them, I had no fashion sense, had glasses, wore braces, and didn't wear makeup, didn't have the latest gen sport bag, wore those ugly LA Gear sneakers that my parents had splurged for me. My family wasn't well off. They spread false rumors that it caused my best friend to turn her back on me because they had told her so many lies about how I took advantage of our friendship. How? They also spread rumors that I was after a boy who was the most popular boy in our grade, and one of those girls had a huge crush on him, and how I was so in love with him. I wasn't. Well, apparently the boys in our grade weren't so fond of them either, and they confronted those girls in the middle of lunch about those rumors. All the guys were on my side since then, and remained that way until end of middle school, when we all separated to go to high school. Years later, I'm in college, and I run into one of the girls and it's obvious that she doesn't remember the ugly things she had said about me, and the hurt that was done to me. strikes up a conversation about how she misses her friends from middle school, asks me to hang out sometime, and gives me her contact info. I threw it out in the trash. I had a horrible 40-year-old woman that got a job with us at my workplace doing sales. At first she seemed nice, but I would always hear about her saying things about everyone that worked there too. She would even insult the store manager and talk about the SM to customers. In a home my SM told me that this 40-year-old said I was trying to take over the SM's job. I thought this was ridiculous. I did not even like the job that much. I just let it slip my mind, but a month later I just wanted to tell the 40-year-old how I feel, so I texted her about how I was not trying to take over. I did not swear or wasn't rude about it. She tries calling me back, but I couldn't take her calls because I was in a seminar for class. When I get the chance to talk to her she demands who told me that and denies saying anything about me. So this housewife calls the SM and begins to rage at her. My SM and I play it cool. SM told her she did not know what she was talking about. This hag was obviously surprised someone spoke back to her. It's my first shift working with this hag after the incident and act like it never happened. Perhaps a few weeks later the franchise manager, above store manager who runs not one, but 5 other stores, finds out about what happened and says if this hag says anything to me about it, she'll be fired. Nothing escalates but the hag has customer complaints against her for being rude and is reported to the company's head office. She is given one final warning. Perhaps 2 more weeks pass and she cannot come to work because she has broken her ankle. Hallelujah. She is off for 6 weeks. It was nearing the time I was about to leave the company for a better higher paying job when I hear she will not be returning for certain reasons. Yeah, I'm glad I won't be seeing her around anymore, especially since the store is at my local shopping center. I've posted about this before, but I find it hilarious and a good story. My cousin was living with my grandmother and grandfather, as well as my mother and stepfather. Around the same time he moved and I moved back home, and thought that this would be a good time to bond. I had purchased a couple ounces of weed before moving back in and kept it in a backpack in my car, and because my cousin also smoked, he knew where it was and we would go smoke together. Few weeks after I move in I can't find my backpack. I asked my grandparents and parents whether they had seen it. Nope. When it was confirmed no one knew about it, I thought on it the day it went missing my cousin was smoking cigarettes which had come from my car. There was only one way he could have gotten them. When he got home from school I casually brought it up to my mom again, who I had spoken to already about what I figured had transpired, and she said come to think of it, I'm missing money, and she asked me, oh, well what does it look like? My cousin says, oh, did it have bedtime things in it? It had sex toys in it as well. Bingo. So, for the next month or so every day, when I went in for a shower I peed in his body wash. I warned my parents of what I was doing. Mom thought it was hilarious, stepdad not so much, so they wouldn't use the body wash themselves, and I took all my things and locked them in my room. It felt good knowing that every single day he was washing himself with more and more of my piss. He still doesn't know, but next family reunion will be fun. In 11th grade my friend sold pills that his family member didn't need. He did this for a couple years without any problems. One day somebody that's been buying from him asks if he can be fronted $60 worth of Vicodin. Doing it many times before he did it without worry. A week's comes up and he calls. Explains how he won't have the money this week, but if he fronts another 60 he'll pay back 150 once he gets paid. My friend agrees. He never pays, changes his phone number, deletes his MySpace, as childish as this sounds, in an attempt to not be found, despite us living in a relatively small town. About a year and a month pass, and he's frequenting the local disc golf course. So he goes there, and sees the person who told him about him showing up around the disc golf course. Starts talking with him, and he's selling him pills now. My friend asks him to set up a deal where he would meet the person who stole from him along his way to buy pills. Keep in mind this person was going to sell him $200 worth, and he said he had the money on him. About 15 minutes pass, and it's being set up. He walks to the other end of the course, so the fastest route for him would be to take a small path/trail. My friend and him meet, and he's scared and surprised. Asked him about the money, and he said he didn't have it. Then told him to give him his money or else he'd get beat up. He doesn't pay, gets beat up pretty bad. Then calls the cops and he goes to jail. Fast forward about 3 years. We are drinking at a bar 2 weeks ago, and as usual a few girls are talking to us, but more hitting on my friend. We think nothing of it, and we go outside, so he can smoke. While outside one of those girls come outside, and asks for a smoke. She's pretty cute, and not as annoying without her friends. At this point I'm pretty wasted, because I don't drink much. My friends talking to this chick and I decide to call it a night, before I can't walk home. Next day my buddy calls me at like 10 in the morning. This is odd, because I stayed out till about 2:30. And he went home with that chick. He tells me how he asks her, my place, or yours? And she says mine. They get to her place, and it's really dark. They stumble to her room, where intercourse took place. The next morning he goes to get some water, and sees some family pictures. Sees the person who ripped him off in a few pictures. He asks her who, if she has any brothers, and says yeah I have one, I think you guys went to school. Her brother was the person who ripped him off. Sorry about the TLDR, hope it was worth it. E/fix typos. So, in high school, my group of friends consisted of myself, my cousin, Jake, and 3 other friends. This is about my cousin though. Jake became friends with a girl he went to school with named Emily. Emily, though, just happened to have a boyfriend, later fiancé, who had graduated a year earlier and joined the army. Because of this, he obviously wasn't around, meaning Jake had Emily all to himself. During this time, he had concocted a secret relationship he had with her he constantly made up stories about. It was pretty obviously fake, because he talked about things we damn well knew didn't or couldn't happen. But we let him continue on for a while, and the stories got more and more outlandish. Eventually, I got fed up with this, and decided, true or not, if he wanted these stories to be real so bad, my friends and I would show him what would happen if they were. So, my friends and I gained access to his MySpace one night, and as him, sent a long descriptive message about all the things that he had supposedly done with Emily, to her fiancé. We knew that it sucked for this guy. But seeing as how towards the end of all this, Jake had Emily playing along with his lies to us, like they were actually together, we thought he should be aware of what was happening, or at least supposedly happening, in his absence. Well, after writing this message out, basically telling this guy that Emily was Jake's girl now, and that he should just back off, so that they could be together, we sent it, and waited for the chaos to ensue. The next morning, we got a panicked phone call from Jake about how 3 guys apparently related to the fiancé showed up to his house, threatening him to stay away from Emily. She also called, telling him she wanted nothing to do with him ever again. Afterwards she went on to graduate and moved to be with him. They are married, and I'm sure that both her and Jake know that it was me, Zach, and Corey that orchestrated the whole thing, but they can never really tell anyone that it was us without admitting that they either A. had a secret relationship or B. made up a secret relationship to make Jake look cooler in front of us. So everyone played along, and no one outside the 5 of us knew what really happened. Since we don't talk to Jake, and he steers clear of us, for a number of reasons. Was dating a girl for a while, let's call her Julie. Couple months into the relationship I find out from a mutual friend that Julie was seen with another guy at a party when she had told me she was going back home that weekend. I try to be the kind of person who does not assume the worst. I confront her about it and ask her if it's true. Says it's a lie and just a ploy to break us up. I'll let it slide and give her the benefit of the doubt until I saw physical proof of her kissing another guy. I remember seeing the picture and feeling an instant burst of rage. Her birthday was coming up, so I made plans to get my revenge then. The plan? It was simple. Sleep with her best friend on her birthday. The plan went off without a hitch. Got Julie extremely drunk, passed out, began flirting with her best friend. We had hung out quite a lot. The sexual tension had been there for weeks. Finally she leads me into her room, and one thing leads to another. End up taking a couple videos using my phone of the event. Fast forward to the next afternoon and we are eating lunch, technically our breakfast, at a local burger joint. I ask her if she can explain what this was as I show her the photo of her kissing another guy. Her face instantly became pale, and before she could let out a word I scroll to the right and say, "Oh wait, I think I figured it out," as she sees her best friend bobbing up and down on my dick. I get up and leave. As I begin to leave the parking lot I look back and see her throwing up. Haven't spoke to her since. I've never felt quite as on top of the world as that day. TLDR, girlfriend cheated on me. Wait till her day. Screw her best friend. And showed her a video of it while eating lunch the next day. While eating, she ends up blowing chunks all over the parking lot at restaurant. I've been waiting to tell this one. Too bad this will get buried. I'm leaving the KK, which is a bar in Madison, Wisconsin. It's bar time, and these African dudes are driving by in this nice Lincoln Town car. They are putting their hands out to give everyone high fives. No one gives them a high five, and they end up stopping in front of the bar. I go up and give this dude a high five. He grabs my hand and then starts pulling me closer to the window, and I'm like, alright, let me go, but he won't let go, and he ends up pulling me even closer, reaches out the window with his other hand, and slaps me in the face. I chase the car down, and I'm trying to punch this dude through the window, but they get away. At this point I'm extremely pissed off, and I'm just stewing in my rage. My friend and I go back to my place, and are sitting on the roof for about 20 minutes, while I continue to replay the scenario in my head over and over and just get more and more angry. I'm literally just sitting there repeating over and over how much I wish I could have stuck that dude, and if I saw him again I was going to get his ass back, never thinking I would. My friend and I end up leaving the roof at about 2:45 AM to go to my other friend's house, who was having people over. So we leave my apartment, and less than a block away I see the same motherfucker that slapped me screaming at some doorman from a hotel on the corner, calling him a bitch and just being an asshole to him. I knew it was my chance. I went up to the car and stood by the passenger side window and just glared at the guy who slapped me. He glanced at me multiple times, but I don't think he ever really realized that I was the guy that he tried to humiliate 30 minutes earlier. I'm standing there just staring at him for about 2 minutes, and the whole time he is hanging out of the window screaming at this doorman at the hotel. Eventually, they start to drive off, since the doorman had told them the police were on their way. As they began to drive off, the guy that slapped me was still hanging out the window screaming obscenities at this doorman. So what did I do? I wound up and fucking slapped the shit out of him as hard as I could. The look of surprise on his face was absolutely priceless. It was the purest form of revenge I think that I will ever experience. Last summer I started helping this guy with a huge project he wanted to pursue. He was a lobbyist for weed legislation or something like that, and after spitballing a few ideas he was set on bringing me into the project. I ended up spending countless hours putting together projected budgets, yearly plans and networking yields and yada yada yada. He is super impressed and tells me about this super private party in LA that he can get me into, on the condition that I get him some FaceTime with the host. I'm confident I can do it, having coached a nationally winning speech team, and decide sure, my 22 years here on earth have been a struggle. Maybe this is my chance at fate. I can't afford a plane ticket, and he can't pay for my travel, he says. This is where I should have drafted up contracts. I say okay, I'll drive out there. I have barely enough in savings to get there and back. Fast forward 1 week. I'm 2,000 miles into my journey with my dog, arriving in LA and freshening up at my cousin's place, and he calls me asking for a ride from the airport. He says he'll book us a hotel room. I pick him up from some small airport in southern LA. We finally find a hotel, and he springs for a presidential suite. I didn't care at this point. I just wanted to get him this meeting and get paid and launch this project that I had become very attached to. We arrive. He looks like he spent a few thousand on clothes, and I had spent over half my savings getting here. I work the Marrakesh house meeting and greeting, and he buries himself in a bottle and a huge blunt. Towards the end of the night I'm talking with this interesting old fellow and the host joins us. The older man compliments me on my inertia, for lack of a better term ATM, and the host and I start chatting. Before long the host is completely absorbed in my grasp of my generation and is dreaming right along with me. My founder is nowhere to be found. Sorry for this huge wall of text, but this has been on my chest for a while and I can't sleep now. I've had a crazy night. Finally we are all in the host's private talk room. And, let it be known, I'm not good at asking for money. I was raised by a single mom and have always been able to make the best and make do. So that's why my friend came. This is his forte, but he is so faked up and enthralled with the one woman in the room. The host is looking at me like, "Kit, you've got it all wrong. I'll help you, but not this fuck up." Party ends soon after. We receive no money. To my knowledge, I lost track of he who shall not be named a few too many times that night, and both fall asleep. The next day I wake up, and I'm taking care of my dog in the car, and watch his face keeps calling me about breakfast. Ends up he had a business meeting with one of his higher ups from Washington, another lobbyist, and needed me to spit some game. I got there too late. My partner faked up and was cut out of Washington's loop for some seedy practices, and he decides to go home. Not answer any of my emails or calls about payment or compensation. He cuts me out. I move on, fallen and out of love on my way back across America, expanding my life experiences tenfold with barely any money left in my billfold. I get back to the Midwest broke. I can't get a place for a while and anything in my price range won't allow dogs. Luckily my family stepped in and looked after my faithful companion. Fast forward a year plus. I'm standing outside of work on a smoke break and watch his face come strolling by with a Rolex and a year-old pit, clearly untrained. Word had gotten around how he kinda faked me over, and he was clearly on the defensive. I smile at the dog, play it cool with him while I smoke, and ask if his dog likes bones. He said that would be great. I go inside and come back out with the biggest pork bone I can find. It's massive. I set it on the ground for his dog and put my cigarette out. Signal that my break is over. Time for us to part ways. Dutcher bag picks the bone away from his dog and tries telling it to sit. I smile as the dog just looks at the bone. I say goodbye completely satisfied as he then proceeds to walk around downtown with his pit bull running up his expensive pants biting at the bone that he holds high above. For the past 9 months I blamed that guy for much of my suffering. I blamed him for me not having my dog anymore. I blamed him for me starting all over. I blamed him for going around town and spreading lies and rumors about me because he tried to take my project and run with it and fell flat on his face. He did a ton of publicity and ended up pointing the finger at me. I just wanted to be compensated. TLDR guy plays with my fate. A year later, I get his untrained dog a bone and let him be the bait. Satisfaction. I has it finally. Edited to add that I'm now a prominent chef at one of my city's best restaurants and thus had access to ossobuco bones, pork leg. Sort of an unplanned revenge happening late one night after a show. I was heading home with a friend. After getting off the bus I noticed a large chunk of triangle-shaped separator cement, much larger than average. Being young, 17, drunk and dumb, I immediately realize that I could put that large object in the middle of the road, just around a turn, and someone would probably hit it. So incredibly dumb. So we walk a few blocks and I, rightfully, start feeling terrible about it. I kept imagining some mom stressed out having a terrible day and then running over it with her minivan. So I turned back to go take it out before something I'd regret forever happens. Before even going 10 feet, this car that looked like something out of Fast and Furious pulls up next to us, filled with some fully thugged out guys blasting some rap. I've had to deal with the local wanabes, but the face tats and looks in their eyes told me not to test it this time. They turn the music down and guys in the back pull out their knives and make some throat slitting gestures and say some stuff. Meanwhile the driver, facing our side, is acting like he's going to pull a gun out and says a bunch of stuff about ending us or something and to come closer. Scared shitless and not sure what to do in the middle of a fight or flight moment, I look at my friend and mumble some stuff to the people and start walking away quickly. Like I said before, it looked like they put a lot of energy into this car. It was lowered, had LED lights on the sides, some stuff written on the side, sounded like it had some air injector thing inside, and looked brand new. It peels out behind us. We are afraid they are going to turn around and come after us. so we run off the street to a dark spot just in case and turn around to see if we need to run like crazy. They gun it through a red light and take the turn at an incredible rate of speed. That's when I heard it, the loud pop, smash crack smash and grind. I completely forgot about the big hunk of cement I left. I accidentally totaled these assholes' car. So we sprint off, obviously not waiting to see their reaction, trying to hold in the laughter long enough to get away. Finally getting home a few blocks later, I laughed harder and longer than I ever have before and probably ever will. Never played organized sports, but that has got to be close to what winning the Super Bowl feels like. Sweet victory. I was playing intramural basketball in college, sophomore year. It was the fraternity league, so there was a bit more ego and pride at stake. Context: our fraternity was the only northern fraternity at our school, planted in the middle of deep south, backwoods city. We took pride in, simply put, not being a bunch of racist facts, having the only multicultural house on campus, often hosting joint parties with the NPHC guys. Much fun. The Grudge. One night we were matched up to play one of our bigger rivals, the guys that dress up in Confederate soldier outfits and take pictures of each other toughing their muzzle loaders. Nuff said. Game is going well, we are winning, but it is pretty close. The game is starting to get dirty. I set a pick at the top of the key. It wasn't too sharp as the crossing guard ran a crossing route that gave away the surprise. The asshole kid comes bowling through anyways with his elbows up. I catch the tip of his elbow right in my sternum, knocking my backwards to the floor and completely out air. As soon as my breath comes back, I knew something was wrong. Every breath sent surging pain through my ribs, front to back. I couldn't breathe in all the way. As soon as I tried to, my ribs would make a loud crack/pop noise. My sternum was cracked. I was done. It took forever to heal. Weeks of painful breaths, having to sleep on my back, cracking pain every time I opened a heavy door or threw my book bag over my shoulder. 8 months later it was still cracking. I missed soccer and softball season and couldn't lift for even longer than that. Payback, senior year, Greek games. Right before graduation, they host a Greek-wide tourney of 12 or so different sports/games. They do it the week of finals. Not the brightest idea in the world, but hey, it's Greek life. We are playing flag football and getting ours handed to us by those rebel boys. We only had one sub and were pretty worn out by the end. I'm playing QB and the asshole Ribcracker was playing corner. He was sticking to my best receiver the whole game, so on the snap I rolled to the left to his side. He finally bites and rushes me as my receiver runs post. I pretended to not see him, scanning the right side of the field to keep the safety from biting on my left post receiver. Too late, the safety picks up the route with the weak safety coming over for backup. Meanwhile old Cracker McElbow is still steaming full speed at me. I stopped rolling left and started shuffling back, as if I'm about to throw across to the right, facing. At first I was going to throw it, but something in my head said fuck it. Maybe it was the losing score and the shittiest receiver on the team, screaming, waving his hands like faking Tom Hanks in Castaway. I waited on that racist fact to get close enough to see the whites of his beady bigot eyes. I planted my back foot and got low, as if I was gone to toss a Hail Mary, coiling up like a rattler. As soon as he stretched forward, arms out like redneck Frankenstein, thinking he was going to snatch my flag, I dropped my shoulder and tucked the ball and exploded up into him shoulder first. It was perfect. The round of my left shoulder was firmly placed right in his solar plexus. I could feel a burst of hot air blow on my face as all of the wind came out of his chest. He stuck there on my shoulder like a bug on a windshield. As I leap forward, the sound of that hit still resonates in my ear, like a sledgehammer hitting a whoopee cushion, followed by the flopping noise of a limp body falling from a few feet in the air. I didn't stay around long to bask in the glory of this sweet revenge. I booked it, turning an ugly play into a 55-yard rush with a few sweet Barry Sanders crossovers, tripping up a few other bigots, before I got my flag pulled near the goal line. As soon as I caught my breath, I turned around to see the dickhead rolling around on the ground. I jogged back to check on him, disguised as a gentleman's gesture. The ref was standing above him hunched over repeating, "Take it easy kid, just breath, just breath." I asked him if he was okay. He just sat there making walrus noises as he gasped for breath. Somewhere in his oxygen deprived head, he got the idea to try and stand up and walk it off. I'm not sure if it was his pride or hubris, maybe just the fact that I was asking him if he was okay, like a parent to a toddler with skinned knees. As he stumbled to his feet, he started walking towards the bench, legs flopping forward like a newborn foal, though he stopped making elephant seal noises, but not as any means of progress. The ref was trying to grab him and hold him back, saying you need to sit, you need to lie down and breath. I think it was about this point that the lights went off upstairs. He took one more step past the ref, his knees oscillating like galloping Guddy, and his eyes rolled right to the back of his head, staring at his oxygen-deprived racist-ass frontal cortex. In that moment of consciousness, his knees locked up and he went limp at the waist, like Woody from Toy Story. Tom Hanks REF-2. He fell face first into that field, like an ostrich trying to bury his head in the sand. Everyone around just froze. No one said a word, but we were all thinking the same thing. That line from The Departed. He fell funny. There he is with his face firmly planted in the soil, his arms flopped out to the side, and his is in the air, like he's getting ready for some weird redneck fraternity gag. Clearly he was in need of some help, but no one wanted to touch him. He became a piece of art, something to gaze upon in wonder. The ref started blowing his whistle and screaming for a sports medic. She quickly runs over and stops a few feet from his lifeless statue-like body. Bent in a V, she probably stood there, motionless, for at least 5 seconds, having flashbacks from basic paramedics classes. Finally she bends down and grabs him by the waist and pushes him over. His face limp, mouth agape, blood coming from his nose and a cut on his cheek, and his lifeless eyes just staring up into the world. She checks his pulse and start talking to him like a deaf person. Wake up, come on now. Wake up. After a few seconds, his eyes roll back and his eyes squeeze shut. His limbs start flopping around again, and then he breathes. They slapped his ass on a stretcher and hauled him off the field, and we got back to losing the game. An ambulance showed up to finish the job at the end of the game and apologized to the ref and assured him that I didn't try and hit him. He looked at me and said, "It looked like he ran into brick wall. That was one of the cleanest textbook hits I have seen." By the next day, talk of that hit was bouncing around Greek week. People talking about the dude that ostrich-ed himself and went unconscious. I got to leave a memorable mark on. A few days later, just before graduation, I saw him on campus. He looked up at me and quickly looked down and walked away. His face was jacked. 2 black eyes and a cut on his cheek, full raccoon face. Knowing he had to walk across stage at graduation looking like that, pretty sweet if you ask me. This will probably get buried, but here goes my story of not so vengeance. When I was 19 I worked at a car dealership. Got along well enough with everyone including the special finance guy who was a big practical joker. Honestly, everyone here was a practical joker and I could probably share hundreds of stories, but this one directly involves me. So the special finance guy, we'll call him Mike, loved to take the soda off my desk, call my name out across the showroom, and have me watch as he proceeded to shake it for a solid minute. I got in my head that I had taken enough, and it was my turn. So I buy a Code Red Mountain Dew, take a screwdriver, and poke 4 holes around the top, set it on my desk and walk away. He was busy with some customers, so I go grab another soda and get back to work. I head to the GM's office to let him know we are gonna need a clean up in the showroom pretty soon. All in all, I'm pretty pleased with myself and excitedly await my revenge. Standing in the general manager's office, I take huge gulp from what I thought was my new soda and Code Red proceeds to pour down my suit and soak me thoroughly. Apparently at some point I had accidentally taken the wrong soda. To top it all off, as I stand there dumbfounded by what I had done, being laughed at by the general and sales manager, I hear my name called. I look out the door, and there's Mike frantically shaking my soda. Worst attempt at revenge I've ever had. This one happened when I was about 14 years old. I was a big fan of Counter-Strike, and back then there were a lot of keygens that would let you make an account and play for free. Problem was, those keys they gave didn't work 99% of the time because everyone had already used them. Well, one day I got pretty lucky and managed to find a working one. I started playing passionately for the next week and told my friend's brother about it. He wanted to play too, so I generously gave him my password. What does he do? He changes it so he can play as much as he likes, as we could not be two on the same account online at the same time. This guy was usually pretty chill, but he was going through intense puberty, so he pulled some scumbag moves sometimes. This was when I began my mastermind plan to get my account back. Back then, I had discovered an exploit that allowed you to change the password of anyone on MSN who you had a lot of info on. If you knew where he lived and a few other stuff, you could have his password resetted and emailed to you in a day or two, at most. So obviously I proceeded to do that with his email, and it all took a day and his MSN was mine. Now he knew that I was good with computers, so next time I was at his house, he asked me if I could help him get it back, which was exactly what I expected he would do. I said I would try to get it back, but that when I did, he would have to give me back my Steam account. He obliged. I waited a few days, gave him back his man, after he gave me back my account. He was very thankful. His brother knew of my plans, and we had a good laugh about it. It's only a few years later that we told him the story about how I masterminded him to give me back my account. We still laugh about it to this day. I took 5 years to graduate college because I was dual majoring, but I really only had friends in my year. For the 5th year I found a room in a house pretty close to campus. It was a little expensive, but I'd rather throw down a little more than have to drive and get a parking permit or take a bus. Think it was like $850 for one of the smaller rooms in the house. Welcome to college towns in California. The Indian guy who was running the house was paying $1,400 for the master suite, biggest room, own bathroom, walk-in closet, deck, and the other 2 bedrooms were going for $1,000 and $1,100 respectively. Anyway, the house was pretty nice. The carpet was trashed, and there were a few other small issues. It had a good-sized backyard, but the barbecue island back there didn't work. One day when the landlord, a recon professor actually who owned a number of houses and rented them to students, was overdoing something, I joked something like for $4,300 a month you'd think you could get the barbecue working. The guy looks at me for a second and said the house was $3,300 a month, at least until he fixed it all up. Faking his whole engine housemate, driving a new Mercedes SUV, was paying $400 a month for the master bedroom, and making everyone else pay his rent. We were all working or taking out loans, while he'd bragged his dad was paying for everything and would always fly home every weekend. Anyway, he was a neurobiology major and wanted to go to med school. Had the grades for it, but it wasn't like a sure thing. Anyway, I made it my job to come home every day for lunch and to check the mail and all those med school letters that were coming back. They got burned. Last I heard, he ended up at a vet school in the Caribbean somewhere. I was in a mosh pit at a show, probably like 5 or 6 guys, and this one little sheet kept elbowing me in the kidneys intentionally. I finally had it and literally threw him through 3 tables. 3 guys ran over to me and tried to rough me up, so I grabbed 2 by the collar, waiting for my friends to realize what was going on, and out of nowhere some sheethead throws a running punch directly at the bridge of my nose. Then he runs away. Turns out, since my head didn't move, my nose did. After 10 minutes trying to reduce it myself, we agreed to go to the ER. When the doc put it back in place with this big metal stick, it sounded like a big branch snapping. I was also doped up, so it just sounded awesome. Next day I'm at a show and bump into a friend, tell him the story, and he just laughs, says I know who did it. This moron posted about it on Facebook. So I went into detective mode. Turns out the next night he was going to a show at this dingy basement pub. Called up my stuff guy's buddies, and we devised a plan on the day if we show up around 8:30 p.m. Walk in, he's working the door. At this point I'm just laughing inside. He didn't recognize me. Pay him my cover. Go to the bar and the owner already knows something is up. 3 guys, 230 pounds, 280 pounds, and a 225 pound 6'5" kickboxer, all clearly on edge. I order us around, turn my chair and stare directly at him. The bar is pretty quiet, and there's some music playing in the background. Lights on. People are just chilling waiting. I wasn't sure if I should give him a chance to fight me like a man or just walk over and rock him. After 5 minutes staring at him, his friends finally caught on and all started whispering to him. He never looked at me. I said, "Fuck it. This kid is a complete coward." Fold up my glasses, walk over, and deliver the hardest punch I've ever thrown. It made a smack similar to the punch sounds you hear in Indiana Jones. His head flew back into the wall and knocked a symbol off. There are symbols hung all over the wall. I went into a blackout rage. He was KO, but as he doubled over I hit him again and woke him up. He started shrieking and crying, blood flowing from his face. I threw him over the table and into another one and jumped onto him trying to break his hand. At this point he's crying and his girlfriend is straddling my back clawing at my neck. So I picked him up and threw him face first into a pillar and blood flew in a narc almost hitting my friend. I shrugged his girlfriend off and walked to the door, turned around, saluted the crowd and my friend yelled, "And that's what you get for sucker punching." We all ran out to the car and sped off into the twilight. He now stays as far from me as possible at any shows, even though I have no quarrel with him left, and I'm even tempted to buy him a beer one of these days. The way he reacted when I sought my revenge was so satisfying, crying. He didn't even try to fight back. Little bit on the brutal side, but it's my best revenge story to date. Also, don't piss off a rugby player in a mosh pit. We have giant smiles on because we love running into people. Senior year of high school, my best friend had sex with my boyfriend. They lost their virginities to each other. She also bragged about it to everyone and told them that my boyfriend has always wanted her secretly and that he only even dated me to get closer to her. She actually tried to make a lot of things really hard for me. I was pissed, but too sad and confused to really do anything, and I couldn't even figure out how to get revenge. I ended up moving far away and going to college, and she stayed there and went to community college. About 7 or so years later I returned to my hometown to visit family. One night I go to a bar and meet this guy, and I figured out that it's her fiance and they were getting married in a month. So I faked him and spent all the time I could with him over the few weeks I was there, never revealing myself. Then after about 3 weeks of doing my best to seduce him, a week before his wedding, he tells me that he has fallen for me quickly and can't imagine anything else. He calls off the wedding. He tells his now ex-fiancée everything, and she is furious. I must also point out that this guy was considered to be loaded, and she was expecting a very easy life with him. I doubt she ever loved him from the stories he told me about her. Anyway, she shows up to my house drunk in her faking wedding dress to come fight me. My mom, who has no idea what's going on, sees that she is unstable and tries to tell her I'm not home. But she doesn't buy it and knocks down my front door to find me in my kitchen. I look at her, the first time I'd seen her since high school, and laugh and tell her that revenge is a beach and now she knows how it feels. She collapses to the floor and starts bawling and howling about how I ruined her life and blah blah blah. My cousin eventually calmed her down and drove her home. I left to return to my job in my app feeling incredibly proud, smug, justified etc. But then about 5 months after it all happened I get a call from my cousin. Apparently after her wedding was called off, mostly because of my actions, she went through some really tough times and ended up going on this alcohol-infused painkiller bender. She basically odd and left herself very brain damaged and is now in a wheelchair, can barely speak or feed herself, and lives in a special home. I don't feel an ounce of sorrow whatsoever. I feel nothing to the point where it makes me question if I maybe be a sociopath or something. And if you're wondering about my boyfriend from high school, he has 4 kids by 3 women, works at a cell phone kiosk at our local mall, and had the audacity to try and hit on me once when I was visiting my family once. He also apparently has a 3-inch erect penis, but I never got to see it. Also, on a twisted note, me and her fiancé have actually remained friends. Even though he knows exactly what I did, he doesn't really seem to care. He even comes to visit me from time to time, and we still sleep together. TLDR, my best friend in high school had sex with my boyfriend, so years later I stole her fiancé and basically drove her to nearly kill herself, leaving her brain damaged and in a wheelchair. I have no sympathy or remorse. My roommate and I were on cheaty terms when he moved out, but I didn't expect him to do anything. The utilities were in his name and the apt complex had weird utility rules which made me transfer the utilities instead of opening a new account. I told him to pay off the balance so I can transfer myself and he did. When I called to do the transfer they gave me a 0.00 balance, but I found out it wasn't paid. He gave them a check and voided it before it was cashed, but after I transferred them to me. He had been on the utilities budget plan and only paid $35 a month, but the entire balance was around $1,700, which I had to accept because transferring them to my name made me responsible, even though it was his bad check. Also, before I found out about the utility bill, I found out he got a rent extension and owed the previous month's rent and the current rent. Not that he paid all the bills, I was giving him the money to pay them and I had already paid him before he got ridiculous. It ended up being $2,800 roughly. The Monday after he moved out some people came to the app looking for him. Apparently he wasn't paying his car bill either and they were there to repo it. I told them every address I knew of that he would go to. They got his car a few hours later. Not only did he lose his car, he also ended up losing his job where he just got promoted. I didn't do it just for the money. He had also stolen a few things I didn't catch at the time. Video games, jewelry, small items he must have taken the last few days he was there while I was at work. On top of the stealing, he tried to get my wife, at the time fiance, to break up with me, ruined some friendships, and attempted to get me fired from my job. Sorry if it doesn't make sense, I just ate a cookie. 7 1/2. Many years ago I lived in a building where in another unit lived a somewhat obnoxious alcoholic asshole whom I tolerated from time to time. Friends on some level, but nothing genuine. We partied and hung out from time to time, but when he spoke of others you saw into his dark side. He drank a lot and smoked weed, but never bought it or usually had any, but would enjoy smoking if someone else had some. He would be nice and somewhat generous in return, a bit of a mooch, but not the worst I've seen. He just wasn't a weed guy enough to buy it and be a regular smoker. He did smoke a lot of cigarettes, however. Over time our friendship wore thinner. My tolerance for his bullshit, annoyingly loud pompous self-speeches, annoyingly insulting, never shutting up, looking to start shit/arguments then blow it off because we're friends etc., was approaching 1 hot summer. He knocks on my door drunk as a skunk one hot summer night after midnight. He says he's been drinking since noon, and because I was on a later shift I wasn't around, and he hasn't had a smoke all day long. WAA. Poor him. He says he started on beer, but they ran out, and the last couple of hours have been drinking whiskey. Blech. And now his friends have left, and he knew I'd be home now, and decided to grab a joint off of me, knowing I'm such a nice guy, and usually had some from time to time back in the day. Now I happen to know, if I'm very drunk and haven't had anything to smoke and then have some when it's quite late, it doesn't end well. This drunken asshole wasn't leaving until I gave him a joint, and I was not putting up with his nonsense. I wanted to send him on his way, and send him on his way I did. I rolled him a fat one from the strongest strain I had on hand. Fatter than I normally would have given had he shown up and asked for one straight in the middle of the day. The next day, or perhaps the day after, he asks me what was in the joint I gave him. He said it tasted great, but about halfway through it everything started spinning hard, and he was in the bathroom puking into the toilet with sweating headache head spins for the next 3 hours. I said, dude, you came here insisting I roll you a spliff, or you weren't leaving, so I gave you one. He said if he ever came up to my place again blackout drunk, to not give him any. At the time I knew I probably shouldn't have given him one knowing what would happen, but over the next year or two he crossed the line several times, exploding whatever remained of our friendship. I regret nothing. I once worked in retail. We had an assistant manager who was brought in after the old one moved to another store. He was a younger getter who had successfully managed large shops before us, and was touted by the store, regional and area managers as being the person who could turn our ailing store's numbers around, or so everybody thought. I was a department manager, and after a few months of him being in the store we had a few issues with inventories being off. After some investigations these discrepancies were dismissed as being handling errors. A few months later, and things were more serious, I was weakly unable to find thousands of dollars worth of stock I had personally accounted for weeks before, and the entire wrath of the company's loss prevention teams came down on all the staff in the store. I and a number of other staff had to regularly answer questions about our movements in and out of the store, how we handled stock, what customers were given in bags. On average I handled 60 plus transactions and 120 plus customers in a 9-hour shift. The questions were brutal. The dock supervisor, who had been with the company for many years and was near retirement age, soon drew the ire of the inspectors, and he was questioned by police and had his life turned upside down by the company's loss prevention department. He started investigating the matter himself, started snooping around the other staff, and quickly stumbled upon some interesting information on the assistant manager. A person with the same first name who looked nearly identical was prosecuted for embezzlement several years earlier in a different state. He started asking around amongst staff he trusted about the assistant manager, myself included. Things quickly started to unravel. We had a few odd stories of happenings involving the assistant manager, but nothing that said concretely that he was suspicious. Then, when one of the staff bumped into a former team member who had mysteriously just stopped turning up for work, she immediately stopped talking when mention of the missing stock and the assistant manager was raised. Eventually, after prompting from the dock manager, the loss prevention team interviewed the former employee, who it turns out had been threatened out of her job after she found out the assistant manager was trying to sell some of the missing stock to one of her friends. It was discovered he had a fraudulent identity and had stolen stock from the store over months and months of working there. But when it came to trial, he never received a prison sentence because beyond what they had direct evidence of him stealing, they couldn't prove his involvement in stealing the other missing stock, even though everybody knew it was him, and it stopped when he was discovered. He was fined by the courts quite severely. He did not pay the fines and quickly disappeared, assuming another name. Unfortunately, the dock manager resigned in anger at the company's treatment of him and his family. The company did not apologize to him, nor any of the other employees who were berated by loss prevention for weeks. Several staff ended up having to take medical leave because of stress-related problems during the investigations, and afterwards we all felt as though we had been cheated by a person we had trusted for months, and he had got out of any form of punishment other than losing his job. A few months later, I received a frenetic call in the middle of a shift from another department manager who had the day off. She was at a toy store across town and had spotted the former assistant manager. After a few phone calls within our company, the loss prevention manager of our entire company, one of the largest retail chains in Australia, personally called the loss prevention manager of the toy store company and told the whole story. He was promptly fired, investigated, and then prosecuted for the same offenses as he had committed with our company there, and I'm told received a jail sentence for it. Next time I saw the former dock manager, I informed him what had happened. I think he must have grinned for the rest of the day. TLDR, dude pretended to be somebody he wasn't, stole from my work, caused a pile of stress and grief, and basically got away with it. A few months later, some colleagues helped in getting him caught for the same crime, and he was made to pay his dues.